Good morning, students. I am Arindam Paricha, teacher in biology, Centurion Public School, Palangir. And today we'll be discussing certain topics regarding biology. And the topics that we'll be discussing today will mainly concern about the introductory part, and a little bit we'll discuss about the properties of living organisms. This video is specifically for the bridge course syllabus, and this is topic number 1. Okay. So let us start. Now here you have this word called as biology. Every biological term, it is derived, or it has been derived from two different words mostly. Like here you can see there are two words. First word is bios, which means life, and the second word is derived from logos, which means to study. So in other words, you can see the study of the life forms or the study of living organisms is known as biology. Okay. Now, as I told you, just bias means life, and logos means to study, right? So there are different branches of biology again further, which we will be classifying in the later classes. It has been classified into the study of animals, which is termed as zoology, study of plants, which is known as botany, study of microorganisms like bacteria and all, which is known as microbiology. So there are multiple branches of biology again, which are further divided, right? But all in all, you can say the study of life or the study of living organisms can be termed as biology. Biology is the study of living organisms or life. Okay. Now, as you know, there are different life forms present on planet Earth. That can be plants, that can be animals, fungus, bacteria, algae, and all the living organisms that you see around yourself. Some of them, they are unicellular, generally made up of only one cell, and it is difficult for us to see through naked eyes. We need a microscope to see them. But some of them are multicellular, like plants and animals, which you can see. They are larger in form, shape, and size. Uh, these are the different kinds of life forms that you will find on planet Earth. Like here you have insects and human beings, bacteria, plants, fungus, algae, all of this. Here I would like to put forward a specific point. See, recently we are going through a very tough situation due to the spread of the coronavirus, COVID-19. And the virus that we are talking about causes a very severe respiratory disease, and it is fatal if untreated properly. So in that condition, this virus that is causing so much of havoc around the world, we do not generally consider virus as living organisms. I repeat my statement. Virus are not considered living organisms. Instead, they are on the boundary line between living and non-living. Means you can neither call them completely living nor call them completely non-living. There are certain properties which are similar to living organisms, but rest of the properties are more common with non-living particles. Okay, so we are excluding virus from this category here, right? Now, how do you understand which is living and which is non-living? So there are certain properties by which you can classify living organisms from the non-living organisms. Okay. So when you're talking of living organisms, the primary property or the first property is every living organism is made up of cell. I think you have already known of this term cell. Okay. Cell are the fundamental structural and functional unit of all living organisms. That means that the structure of the body of any organism is made up of cell, means it is the structural unit, as well as every function that a living organism carries out is also due to the cells itself. Okay, like take the example plants, they carry out photosynthesis. The photosynthesis is not actually done by the plant, it is done by the cells of the plant, which contain chloroplast. Okay, similarly in human beings, our stomach carries out digestion. It is not actually the stomach who is carrying out digestion, it is the cell in the stomach which produce digestive enzyme that carries out digestion. So cells are small building blocks, fundamental building blocks that form the structure of the organism, as well as carry out all the different functions or physiological process within living organisms. And that is why cell is also termed as unit of life. Okay. Now, cell was discovered by Robert Hooke in the year 1665. This is a very important discovery as far as biological sciences is concerned, because till this time period we were unknown of what a human body or a organism's body is made up of. Robert Hooke, he actually took a piece of cork and he put it under a microscope, as you can see in this diagram here. So it took a piece of cork and he put it under a microscope. He could find small compartment like structures. As you can see here, these dotted structures, they're compartment like. Okay. Now this compartment like, they were like more or less hexagonal, somewhat like this. Okay. More or less like a honeycomb, you can say. So this small compartment like structures which he observed under the microscope, he termed it as cell, because the English term cell literally means small compartments. Okay. But remember here, actually Robert Hooke did not discover living cell. He discovered dead cells, because the cells of a cork of the plant are generally dead. They do not contain any cytoplasm. They do not contain any kind of cellular material. Okay. So Robert Hooke discovered cell in the year 1665. Now, based on the structure and its functionality, we can categorize cell into two types. They are the plant cell and the animal cell. So there are certain differences between these two cells, the plant cell and the animal cell. As you know, plants are capable of photosynthesis. They can produce their own food. Okay. But in case of animals, you will find they cannot prepare their own food. They are dependent on others for food. So you'll find there are certain differences between plant cell and animal cell. Plant cell, they can carry out photosynthesis because they have chloroplast. Animal cells do not have any kind of chloroplast. Plant cell outer layer is hard, called as cell wall. Animal cell do not possess a cell wall. Plant cell possesses a central vacuole. It is not seen in case of animal cell. Animal cell possess centrioles, which is not found in plant cell. So there are certain structural and functional differences between a plant cell and an animal cell. The plant cell was discovered, okay, I'm just taking it here. The plant cell was discovered by M.J. Sheldon in the year 1839, whereas the animal cell was discovered by Theodore Swan. Okay. M.J. Sheldon discovered the plant cell and Theodore Swan, or T. Swan, discovered the animal cell. These two are scientists have contributed a lot to understanding the cell, its cellular structure, its organization. In fact, what both of them did was they accumulated their findings about the plant cell and animal cell, and they put it in the form of a theory. Okay. So what was done by these two scientists was they put down whatever finding they had into a theory. Now these are two scientists, M.J. Sheldon and Theodore Swan. Now when they put down these two combinedly, they formed a theory which is known as, we'll be looking at it in the next slide, the cell theory. Okay, I just have to move this. So they formulated the cell theory. M.J. Sheldon and Theodore Swan, they accumulated both their findings to form the cell theory. It was formulated in 1839 by M.J. Sheldon and Theodore Swan. Now there are certain points of the cell theory. The first and the primary point is all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. Okay, so this is what we have also discussed. We've just mentioned that organisms are made up of one or more cells. Now, if an organism is made up of one cell, it is called as unicellular, and if it is made up of many cells, it is known as multicellular. Okay, so if an organism is made up of just one cell, we term it as unicellular, but if the organism is made up of many cells, it is termed as multicellular. Whatever may be, every living organism should be made up of cell, right? Now the second point of the theory is cell is the basic unit of structure and organization. This also we have mentioned previously, that every living organism structure is composed of cell. Its organization is composed of cell. Okay. The third point of the cell theory states that cell arise from pre-existing cells. See, cells can neither be created or nor they can be accumulated from somewhere. Okay, what I mean to say is cell will only come into existence by the division of other cell. If you take a look at your body, you'll see all the cells present in your body only arise due to cell division. It is not like you can create a cell out of nothing, or you can create a cell out of just raw materials like the different kinds of biomolecules. Okay, though our cells are made up of biomolecules, but we cannot create it by combining biomolecules. Okay, so that is what this point states. Cell arise from pre-existing cell. Whatever cell is present today, that cell will come from a pre-existing cell by the process of cell division. There are two kinds of cell division, mitosis and meiosis. We'll discuss about this in the topic of cell and cell division. But for the timing, just remember, mitosis and meiosis are the two kinds of cell division. Omnis cellula e cellulae. This is the Greek terminology, which means all cell arise from pre-existing cell. Now, this point was actually introduced by Rudolf Virchow. Okay, the third point of the cell theory, cell arise from pre-existing cell, was described by Rudolf Virchow. Omnis cellula e cellulae, which means all cell arise from pre-existing cells. Okay. Now, this is Rudolf Virchow who stated this. So, these are the basic 3 points of cell theory. All living organisms are composed of one or more cells. The cells is the basic unit of structure and organization in organisms. Cell arise from pre-existing cell. Okay. Now, the second property of all living organisms is metabolism. The chemical processes that occur within a living organism in order to maintain life is called as metabolism. You might have observed this, that every living organism carries out different processes like respiration, circulation, excretion, digestion, photosynthesis. So all these processes are actually chemical reactions. They are called as biochemical reactions because they occur inside the living organism. Okay. So these processes due to these chemical reactions is termed as metabolism or metabolic process. We can define them as, these are the different kinds of metabolic process that is carried out by living organisms. Now let us look into this in this manner. If you are taking photosynthesis and respiration into consideration, they are actually chemical reactions. See, this is a point you need to get into your mind, that whenever we are talking of any biological process, basically it is a chemical process, okay, but occurring inside a living organism. So we call it as a biochemical process, okay. If you take a look at photosynthesis, here you can see C6, 6CO2 plus 6H2O gives C6H12O6 plus 6O2 in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. That is photosynthesis, as you know it. So photosynthesis is actually a chemical reaction where carbon dioxide and water is combining to form glucose molecule, that is C6H12O6. Now, if you reverse this reaction, C6H12O6 or glucose breaks down in the presence of oxygen, molecular oxygen, to produce chemical energy in the form of ATP and give out carbon dioxide and water. Okay. So the respiration process which we consider is actually breakdown of food to produce energy and release out carbon dioxide and water. So even that is a chemical reaction. All the biological process that you consider inside your body are actually biochemical reactions. That is termed as metabolism. So this is the second property of every living organism. Every living organism will carry out metabolism. Okay. Now next, here you can see there are metabolism includes two different types of process: catabolism, anabolism. Now the catabolism are destructive processes, where the anabolism are constructive process. If you look at the chemical reaction mentioned here, 6CO2 plus 6H2O gives C6H12O6. Now this is a constructive process because the molecule is getting constructed here. Okay, here we are having a molecule C6H12O6. We are constructing. So that is a anabolic process. Constructive processes are anabolic process. Destructive processes are catabolic process. Now if you reverse this reaction, glucose in the presence of oxygen is breaking down to form carbon dioxide and water. That is a catabolic process because the glucose molecule is breaking down. Digestion is a catabolic process, okay, where the food molecules are getting broken down. So that is catabolism. So metabolism includes two different processes. Some of them are destructive, called as catabolism, and some of them are constructive, known as anabolism. Okay. Now let's go to the next slide. The third property of every living organism is reproduction. Okay. It is a process, biological process, by which new individual organisms, offsprings are produced from their parents, right? So when biological organisms are produced or new individuals are produced from parent organisms, it is called as reproduction. Production means to produce. Reproduction means to produce again and again and again, generation after generation. You have come from your parents. Your parents have given birth to you. Your parents have come from your grandparents. Your grandparents have come from great grandparents. So here you'll find every living organism gives birth or produces its own kind, its own species, its own type. Okay, so that mechanism is called as reproduction. Reproduction can be of two types: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. As simply explained, asexual reproduction literally means without the involvement of sex or without the involvement of the reproductive cells. Whereas sexual reproduction involves the reproductive cells, which are called as gametes. Okay. Asexual reproduction is generally carried out by a single parent and does not involve fusion of gametes. So when there is only one parent involved, it is called as asexual reproduction. And such kind of reproduction is also termed as unisexual reproduction or unisexual parental reproduction, because only one individual is necessary. You don't need the father and the mother. You don't need both parents. Only one parent is necessary. The organism itself will divide to form two new organisms or sometimes multiple organisms. So there you will not need any kind of reproductive cell, which are called as gametes. Okay, there is no fusion of gametes, there is no production of gametes, no two parents are required. Only one parent is sufficient to carry out this kind of reproduction. That is called as asexual reproduction. But in case of sexual reproduction, it involves the fusion of gametes produced by two different parents. Now here you see we are using two different parents. That means one is a male individual, the other is a female individual. So as because two different individuals are involved, this is called as biparental. Okay, so this kind of is called as biparental. Okay, please rectify the previous statement that I had mentioned. This is not actually unisexual. I'll just erase this out. This is actually called as uniparental. Okay, just rectify that. So asexual reproduction is uniparental, whereas sexual reproduction is biparental. Two parents are necessary, the father and the mother. Okay. Now both the father and mother will produce the respective gametes, and these gametes will fuse together to form a zygote that will develop into a new organism. Okay. I'll just show you here. Now this is asexual reproduction. Single parent divides to form two new offspring, or you can say a single cell divides to form two new daughter cells. This is uniparental, only one parent is involved. This is asexual reproduction. Whereas in sexual reproduction, you will need two parents, the male parent and the female parent. The male parent produces the male gamete, in case of humans that is sperm, and the female individual produces the female gamete, that is ovum. Now both of these will combine together, a process called as fertilization, to form a single cell, that is the zygote. Now remember, this zygote will have the characteristic or the genetic material from both the parents, from the father as well as from the mother. The zygote further divides to form the embryo, and that embryo will develop into a new individual. So this is the mode of sexual reproduction. Okay. So two different parents necessary. That is why it is called as biparental. Whereas in asexual reproduction, only one parent is involved. It is called as uniparental. Now there are different modes of asexual reproduction. Binary fission. Bi means two. So a single organism divides to form two different organisms. It is called as binary fission, which we just saw in case of the bacteria or the protozoans. One cell divides to form two cells. Binary fission. Okay. Now the second mode is called as multiple fission. Multiple means many. When a single cell divides to form many cells. Here you can see a single cell is dividing to form many cells, or a single microorganism is dividing to form many microorganisms. That is called as multiple fission. Next is budding. Bud means a small outgrowth or small extension, generally from the vegetative part, not the reproductive part. Remember, in budding, reproductive parts are not involved. Okay. So here you can see in case of Hydra, this example is mentioned here. So Hydra will develop a small bud, small extension outgrowth. Now that bud slowly starts to develop into a small Hydra, okay, a miniature Hydra. Now that miniature Hydra will grow and mature. Now finally this will detach from the parent body and form a new Hydra. Here, it detaches from the parent body and forms a new Hydra. So this kind of reproduction is called as budding. Okay, so a small bud-like structure will be formed that later on matures and then separates away from the parent to form a new individual. Next, spore formation. Now, spore formation generally seen in case of fungus. You'll find a vegetative part of the structure forms the sporangium. The small bud-like structure is sporangium, which is labeled 1 here. Okay, so this is the sporangium. Inside the sporangium, there are certain cells called as spores. Now, the spores are actually cells which can remain inactive for a very long duration of time in the atmosphere. Once they are released, they will circulate in the atmosphere, and when they get any favorable conditions, they will germinate into new organisms. Okay, so that is spore formation, generally seen in case of fungus. Next is fragmentation. Fragment means pieces. So here you can see in this diagram, fragmentation literally means organisms that are fragmented result in each fragment growing into a new organism. So you can say if you cut a living organism or if you break a living organism into small pieces, each of the pieces will develop into a new organism. That is termed as fragmentation. Now there is a quite similar process to that which is called as regeneration. We have just shown here this one, regeneration. But remember, regeneration is not a mode of reproduction. It is a mode of regrowth. In case of lizards, you might have seen if the tail is cut off, a new tail is grown. But the cut tail does not grow into a new lizard, as it is seen in case of fragmentation. So in regeneration, a cut body part will regenerate or will regrow, but will not develop into a new organism. Here, this is an example of salamander. If you cut the leg of an salamander or an arm of a salamander, it can regrow the arm or the leg. So that is termed as regeneration. Regeneration occurs when an organism wants to regrow a lost limb or any other part of the body, but it does not involve the formation of a new individual. So it cannot be called as a mode of reproduction. Okay. And let's go to the next slide. The next property is growth and development. Organisms grow and develop, right? So what is growth actually? In biological terms, you can say or you can define growth as an increase in size, mass or number. If there is this increase in size of the organism through cellular division, or if there is an increase in mass of the organism, or in some cases if there is increase in number. Now when we are talking of increase in number and term it as growth, generally remember it is seen in case of microorganisms, because microorganisms are made up of only single cell. So when they divide, they cannot grow into a multicellular organism. Instead, they develop many small organisms, many unicellular organisms. So their number increases. That can be termed as growth. Okay. Now, as you can see, a plant is growing, it is developing, right? From a seed, it germinates to form a plantlet first, then it develops into a complete plant. This is plant growth. Now, in case of bacteria, it forms small colonies. As you have mentioned here, as you can see here, they are not developing in size, they are actually developing in number. So that is called as growth in case of bacteria. So growth can be defined as increase in size, mass, or number of the individual. Okay, growth and development, remember students, is a property of living organisms. It is not seen in case of non-living organisms, right? Now, development is growth in function and capability. See, we are using two words here, growth and development. Now here, development means growth in function, not in size, shape, or structure, or in capabilities. Let me explain it to you in this manner. When we are talking of development, a child development, so we are not actually talking of child's growth in size. We are talking of child's maturity, child's mental development. When you are developing mentally, you are capable of thinking new things, analyzing new things, grasping new things. But your brain is not actually increasing in size. Your thought process, your grasping capacity, your functional capacity is increasing. So when there is growth in function or capability, that is termed as development. Okay. So these are the two terms, growth and development. The next property of living organism is responsiveness. Responsiveness means to respond. To be simply said, any process that results in a change in state or activity of a cell or an organism in terms of movement, secretion of enzyme production, gene expression, etc., as a result of stimulus is called as what? It is called as response or response to stimulus. So there are different things in the environment to which we respond. It can be the atmospheric condition, it can be some physical elements, it can be some chemical substances. We react to them. And this reaction is only carried out by living organisms. And that is called as response to stimulus. Now, stimulus, we are using a word here, stimulus. Stimulus is a thing or event that evokes specific functional reaction in an organ or tissue. Okay. Suppose, let me give you an example here. Suppose I give you a chili to eat and you are eating a chili. What happens? You start secreting saliva, then water comes dripping down your eyes and your nose. So you are responding. So you're not actually responding to chili. You are responding to the chemical present in chili, right? So here chili becomes a stimulus. Similarly, if I take a torch and I shine the torch directly into your eyes, what will happen? You'll close your eyes. So the light which is coming into your eyes is the stimulus and you are generating a response. Okay, so that is called as response to stimulus. Only living organisms can respond to stimulus. Non-living particles do not respond. The physical, the stimulus can be of different types: physical stimulus, chemical stimulus, environmental stimulus, mechanical stimulus. Like environmental stimulus, if you're talking of, it is summer. See, right now we are coming to the peak of summers. It's already April, mid-April. By May, we'll be getting, it will be getting very hot. So when there is summer, your body starts to sweat, right? That is a response to the environment. Similarly, during winters, you shiver. That is a response. So there can be different kinds of stimulus: physical, chemical, environmental, mechanical, etc. These are some of the examples: closing of eyes on direct exposure to sunlight, shivering at cold climatic conditions, tropic and gnostic movement in plants. Okay. Now, tropic movements means movement due to growth. Suppose you put a plant in a dark room and you make a small hole in the wall and a light is dripping down from the wall hole. So the plant will grow towards the light. That is tropic movement. Gnostic movement means sudden movements. Okay. So here you can see this is a gnostic movement. Mimosa pudica, or touch me not plant. If you touch the leaves of the plant, the leaves will automatically close. You can see here in this diagram. So this sudden movement of plant is called as gnostic movement. Tropic movement, movement of plant due to growth. Gnostic movement, sudden movement of plant without growth. Okay. Now the last, you can say, property of living organism. There are many properties. We are only discussing 6 here. Adaptation. Adaptation is made up of two different words. Ad means towards, apt means adjust. So simply said, towards adjustment, or you can say adjusting yourself. So when you're adjusting yourself to the environment, to the situation, to your surroundings, that is called as adaptation. Okay. During summers, generally we wear the cotton clothes. This is one kind of adjustment we do. But when it gets into the rainy season, we start wearing raincoats or we carry umbrella. That is adaptation. Depending on the situation, depending on the climate, we are changing. And when it comes to the winters, we start wearing jackets, sweaters, mufflers. We are adapting to the cold climatic condition. So these kind of adaptations are done by living organisms. Okay. It is not a property of non-living particles. So adaptation is an evolutionary process where an organism becomes better suited to its habitat. Means you are becoming better adjusted to your habitat. You're changing surrounding, your environment. So that is called as adaptation. Okay. So adaptation can be either short term or long term. This is a very important point that you need to remember. See, all the adaptations are not generally for a very short period of time. Some can be a very long duration of time, or some can be permanent changes, right? Now, the short term adaptations can be for a short period of time and temporary, whereas long term adaptations are generally permanent and heritable. So short term adaptations, generally they are for a very short period of time, maybe a few weeks or maybe a few months. They are temporary, they are not permanent. Okay. But whenever you are considering long term adaptations, they are permanent and heritable. Heritable means transmitted from one generation to another. Okay. For example, short term adaptation is hibernation, migration, estivation, and the long term adaptation modifications of fluke of whale, webbed feet of birds. These are long term adaptations. See, I think you know about this term, which is hibernation. I think you might have heard of this. Hibernation means winter sleep. Certain organisms during the winters, when the conditions are unfavorable, when the climatic condition is very cold, food is not available, they go into a state of inactiveness for 3 to 4 months. Or you can say they sleep in one way for a few months, and that is called as hibernation. Similarly, during summers also, when the condition is unfavorable, they undergo changes. They sleep or they become inactive for a long duration of time. They go into burrows. They live inside the soil. That is called as estivation. So hibernation is winter sleep. Estivation is summer sleep. And migration, as you know, migrating from one place to another, which is seen in case of birds. In Odisha, there is a place called Chilika. And I think you might be aware of this, that many birds from the northern countries come to Chilika during winters. So organisms migrate from one place to another. When there is unfavorable condition in one place, they will move away to other place. Even we migrate. I think you might have seen this during summers. People generally tend to go on vacation, on holidays, to cold climatic areas like Manali, Shimla, Darjeeling, Gangtok. So cold climatic areas, we migrate, we move away from unfavorable conditions. That is called as migration. But these are short term. They will not be permanent, for a few days, for a few weeks, or for a few months only. Okay. But if the change is permanent, then that is called as long-term adaptation. So this is an example of hibernation, a bear who is living inside its cave to hibernate. Now, fluke of whale and webbed feet of birds are permanent changes. Now see, whale are mammal, but they live in water. Okay. So though they live in water, they have certain mammalian properties, but there have been some changes. What is the change? Their arms or legs have been modified into fluke, which helps them to swim. These structures, this one, these are the flukes and flippers. The tail is fluke. Okay. So that has been modified. They don't have hands and legs anymore, or they don't have a tail. They have a flat tail called as fluke. They have flat forearms, which are called as flippers, which help them to swim. These are permanent changes. Okay. And they are transmitted from one generation to another. Similarly, birds like duck, they are birds, but generally they live in water. So to swim in water, they need these webbed feet. Means there is a layer of skin between their fingers. This is called as webbed feet. So these are permanent changes. So they are called as the long-term adaptations, right? So these are the 6 basic properties of living organisms. Every living organism is made up of cell. They carry out metabolism, they carry out reproduction, they respond to stimulus, they have adaptations, they change according to the change in climate. And one more point that we have mentioned, let me get back, I think cellular composition, metabolism, reproduction, response to stimulus, adaptation. Okay, so these are the five different points that we have put forward. And one more point that I'm missing out, I'll just get back to you. Growth and development, right? So these are the 6 properties of living organisms. So in the next class, we'll discuss about the biological classifications, right? Thank you.